Hello, we are the instructional coaches for Patrick County Public School System. My name is Sarah Vernon.
And my name is Callie Wheeler. We serve 6 elementary schools and 1 high school in rural Southwest Virginia.
Although we are considered a small district, we have made huge changes in our reading instruction.
First, we would like to tell you a little bit about our own Science of Reading journeys before we became a team. Before moving to Virginia 3 years ago, I was a teacher for 9 years in Vermont and New Hampshire. I was at the heart of Teachers College, Lucy Calkins, and Fountas Pinnell. While getting my undergraduate degree and my master's, I was taught effective ways to run a guided reading group, how to give running records and select level text for my students. The mindset that just exposing students to books will make them become readers was ingrained in me during every elementary and literacy college class that I took. And I can honestly say that it absolutely prepared me for entering the teaching profession. That's because my first job was in a balanced literacy building that was rich in FMP, LLI, Lucy Calkins, and Jan Richardson. I spent the next 9 years teaching guided reading, attending every seminar I could find, and waiting for my turn to be trained as a reading recovery teacher. It never happened. Regardless, I still felt like a strong teacher. I had my reading nook that was expertly redecorated every year. I had my guided reading bins organized by reading level and color-coded. I was trained and strong in LLI, and I helped implement it in other teachers' classrooms. I carried my highlighted, marked up FMP continuum around like it was gold. Other than the unusual Foundations Wilson training I had, I was confident that with enough exposure to text, these kids would eventually get it. Maybe they just weren't ready yet.
My journey began in 1994, where I pursued an undergraduate degree in elementary education. I student taught in a first grade classroom where my guiding teacher was grounded in whole language. We read books, flashed cards, looked at pictures, and guessed words all semester long. Some students got it, they could read. Several could not. The next year, I applied for a teaching position in my local school district, where I was hired as a special education teacher for a K-7 school. That's right, special education, no special education background, not a degree, but I went in, I taught reading, or so I thought. I provided accommodations, worked with students to pass the Stanford 9 test, and assisted in classrooms. The following year, I switched schools in the district and began teaching 5th grade ELA, math, social studies, and 7th grade reading. I love novel studies, so I dove in, picked some Newbery books, and we read. I had lists of vocabulary words that my students looked up in the dictionary. We did fun projects, and we enjoyed the movie afterwards. I sprinkled in some comprehension skills and then drowned my students with test prep passages for the last 2 months of school. I had an English book, a spelling book, and a spelling book where we systematically did all the pages in a week and tested on Fridays. I remember the students loved playing a game we used to call Cherry Pie for spelling, which really didn't even help. Over the next few years, I taught different subjects in grades 5 through 7, always teaching a class or 2 of ELA. Then came an initiative in Virginia for all teachers to be highly qualified, which meant in order to continue to teach 6th grade, which I had fallen in love with, I would need to take 1 college class to add the pre-K and 6th grade endorsement. The class needed language and acquisition. So after 7 years of teaching, I enrolled in my first phonics class. After 7 years of teaching, I was learning what a phoneme was, what diphthongs were, and vowel teams. Why hadn't I already had a class like this? I remember learning about the National Reading Panel and the different pillars of reading. I also remember thinking about how much I didn't know about teaching reading and that I had been doing it wrong for 7 years. Over the next 10 years, I eventually settled in teaching 6th grade math and acquired my master's in curriculum and instruction.
Well, my balanced literacy path of destruction didn't stop in New England. It followed me all the way to Virginia. where I became the 2nd and 3rd grade ELA teacher. I brought a wealth of knowledge to the division that I was in. We were in our first year of Lucy Calkins' adoption here. I was immediately familiar with running records. I even convinced my principal at the time to drop $3,500 on green and red LLI kits so we would get ahead of the game. Wow. I wish I could say that I started to realize something wasn't right, that I needed to change. I think that would be a better story, actually. Self-realization that I had been doing things wrong for 10 years, but that's not what happened. In 2020, I became the Title I teacher for the building, and my good friend became the principal. My principal started talking about the science of reading. In her previous years, she was Title I and SPED, and our conversations often led to what we can do differently and how we can teach these students to read. Our small rural county with little internet access was greatly impacted by COVID. The learning loss that followed was astronomical for all of our students, and especially one of my own children. My middle child entered kindergarten in 2020, and right away I noticed that he wasn't picking up on things. He struggled much more than his older brother ever did. He was actually recently diagnosed with dyslexia. He wasn't learning to read. I brought home a little level A books and did all the things that my guided reading teacher's companion told me to do, but it wasn't getting any better. He wasn't the only one though. Yes, a few students caught on, but the majority of our students were leaving kindergarten knowing their letter sounds and not knowing their letter sounds, their letter names, or being able to blend. We had to change. As the only Title I teacher in my building, I knew it started with me. The conversations about a different approach started to take action. I began to look up what decodable books were. I took down my beautiful color laminated posters that said, "Look at the picture and what would make sense," and started using words I was told never to use. Sound it out. I started doing more diagnostic testing with struggling students to see where they were and how to best help them. We had words their way assessments that we would be given periodically to the students, but I began to actually look at the data collected and see where the gaps were. My mindset began to shift. My principal began to speak to others in the division about how the brain learns to read. I started talking to teachers in my building and working with individual students who needed extra support. My impact was small, and I struggled with a lot of guilt and shame. For 10 years, I had been so wrong. I had failed so many children by assuming they would eventually get it. I didn't teach them how to read. I put books in front of them and used terrible strategies like memorization and blatant guessing. Yes, a few, like my oldest son, got it. But most didn't. And I will always bear that burden. That burden gives me purpose though, and my ambition to activate change. I began listening to the Science of Reading podcasts, reading and using books like Equipped for Reading Success and Shifting the Balance. My individual transformation started happening. In 2021, I completed my education specialist degree in teacher leadership and coaching and was hired as one of 2 instructional coaches in my division. Now I was ready. I was armed with the knowledge about SOR, and I was confident that this position would help me spread that knowledge.
So before Callie was hired in 2017, I became an instructional coach for the entire district, 6 elementary schools and 1 high school. That first year, our district purchased guided reading libraries for all schools, and every classroom, grade levels K through 5, received leveled reading libraries. We collected all books, readers, novel sets, went into storage and collected old readers and old readers from retired textbooks and leveled everything. Hours upon hours of leveling. I provided Jan Richardson guided reading professional development at every elementary school, and our teachers were immersed in daily 5 rotations, guided reading groups, 3 queuing system, running records. One of our libraries was located in the Title I classroom of one of our smallest schools. This Title I teacher at the time had been a former special education teacher at my previous school. We enjoyed our time together and often discussed how we could better teach our students to read. I remember asking questions like, why weren't we asking our students to sound words out? We had long discussions on these questions and on the reading wars, and she is the one who introduced me to the science of reading. At this point, our schools had shifted to a balanced literacy approach. We were teaching phonics and used guided reading groups. Looking back, we were totally piecemealing. A little bit of phonics, a little bit of guided reading, and then what about the writing piece? Well, then came Lucy. Our writing scores had gone down in the 8th grade on the 8th grade SOL test. And what was the answer to that? Implement Lucy Calkins' writing units of study. That's when I met Callie, new teacher to our district, trained and taught the units of study with fidelity.
So this is where our stories collide. We were both enrolled in letters, and now we were the 2 instructional coaches for our small division. Although we came from different backgrounds, our trajectory was the same. Implement change for our division. Mm-hmm. Teach our teachers the why behind this change. Instill research-based practices and teach our students how to read. Looking back, we had no idea that the journey we would embark on is where we are today. Changing your own mindset is one thing, but changing a district's is quite another. This next part of our story we will call Building Our Coalition of the Willing.
So when Callie came on as coach number 2, I was ecstatic. We had just finished the first part of the letters training, and we still had lots of questions and ideas swirling in our heads. We knew we were doing it wrong, but wasn't sure how to make that change. Callie had this bright idea about taking a group of teachers to Plain Talk in New Orleans. She had a dream. My first reaction was laughter. Small town, 2nd lowest funded school in the state. No way. But she kept on. We needed a team to learn, to embrace the science of reading, and to lead. She kept at it. We researched, planned, and budgeted a trip to Plain Talk for the 2 of us. We needed ideas. When we pitched our idea to our assistant superintendents, they thought we were crazy. However, our superintendent had become a skilled grant writer and thought he could help. We are extremely fortunate. Our 3 administrators at the central office, our assistant superintendent of instruction, assistant superintendent of administration, and our superintendent believed in us wholeheartedly, understood a change was needed, and although they thought we were crazy, they took a leap of faith and supported us. A few days later, we got a call from our superintendent that he wanted us to take a group of 10 to New Orleans to the Plain Talk conference. He told us that if we planned it all, flights, hotel, food, transportation, and activities, then he would write a grant. So that is what we did. We spent hours searching for flights, calling hotels and shuttles, and making sure we were ready. We ended up taking 12 people, 6 teachers, 2 coaches, 1 principal, 2 assistant superintendents, and 1 superintendent. The total cost was $22,624, and that included everything: travel, registration, lodging, and meals. We used the ESSER funds for it all, and it was worth every penny.
So I could spend hours talking about our experience as a team at New Orleans, the sessions, the eye-opening information, and the like-minded people gathered in one place. I heard so many stories like my own. We also first met Amplify and NOLA. When we came back, we were invigorated. We now knew better, and we were prepared to do better. We began by training our principals. Our focus was a top-down approach. We wanted our leaders to understand the research, support the change, and prepare their staff for new approaches. Sarah and I spent 2 days training, and it was just a snapshot of what science of reading is, what the research says, and setting the groundwork for curriculum adoption. We spent countless hours weeding through reviews of curricula. We combed through ed reports, went through feedback from social media and articles, reached out to other divisions, all to find what curricula would meet our needs. At every turn, we stumbled back on CKLA. We printed off several free units from the core knowledge websites and even convinced a few teachers to give it a try. I remember a kindergarten teacher who was piloting telling me she was floored by the Sounds First approach. She would have never thought of teaching Sounds First, but wow, she loved it. When we met with our assistant superintendent, our honest answer was Amplify CKLA was the only choice. It met all the boxes. Now we needed to see what our teachers thought. We moved on to a curriculum team. This was a team comprised of teachers who attended Plank Talk with us, as well as some veteran teachers in the division. The groups of teachers weeded through units, assessments, and readers, all while using the Reading League's curriculum evaluation tool. The vote was unanimous. It had been about 12 years since our last ELA adoption journeys, so we were very excited.
So we officially adopted CKLA in May of 2022. We were excited to get our materials prior to our first CKLA teacher training at the end of May. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but our training went on. We expected our materials in June and assumed that Callie and I would have the summer months to organize and distribute all the materials. Materials began trickling in at the end of July. By our first day back from summer vacation, we had received our teacher kits and parts of Unit 1 for each grade level. Callie and I began making copies of everything we didn't have just to get started. We had our next training via Zoom, which basically reviewed what we learned at our first. Despite an uneasy feeling, our teachers were troopers. We did a lot of, it's going to be okay and you're doing great coaching. We dove in with our teachers to support them as best as we could. As with all new things, we had a little pushback, but it always came back to that this curriculum was rooted in the science of reading, and we knew we needed to trust the process. After a few weeks in, our teachers had either found or purchased slides to go along with the lessons. Most had administered the beginning of year assessments, and our CKLA curriculum was off to a great start. Our next trainer, Kirsten, who was wonderful, trained our administration and principals. We did walkthroughs and used CKLA trackers, and she gave us lots of feedback. We had Kirsten back in December to continue CKLA professional development with our teachers. She has been our lifeline.
We like to think our journey is still just beginning. Sarah and I just finished up the second half of Letters Units 5 through 8. We also have offered a voluntary vocabulary class for teachers that was pretty successful. And this week we are starting our Sold the Story podcast study. It will be 6 sessions and we have 35 people signed up to participate. Although we've had struggles with materials, we know CKLA is making a huge difference for our students. We have seen some great growth, especially with our K2 students. And the rich content in 3-5 is building content knowledge with our older students. Our K2 teachers are becoming believers. Our kindergarten students are actually reading. We are finally closing that gap. All this in a year's time. Sarah and I spend our days in PLCs talking about implementation, combing through units and lessons with teachers, observing, using the tracker we got in the leadership training to give feedback, and finding answers to questions. We make data sheets to organize BOI, MOI, EOI assessments. We offer additional training in using the hub and play our role as a sounding board for teachers who are still struggling with this huge transition. We also spend time doing inventory, organizing materials, and hiding levels A through E level texts, and making sure our teachers always feel supported.
Over the past 3 years, we have found that this is truly a journey. It ebbs and flows. We celebrate our wins, like convincing a veteran teacher to stop the 3 queuing system or put away that level B reader and use the decodable. And then we know we are making a difference. Almost all of Title I and SPED teachers have completed the first part of letters, and we have fully implemented CKLA skills in K2 and the whole program in 3-5. And we are looking forward to now having a few K2 teachers pilot the knowledge next year.
Sarah and I just returned from the VSLA conference in Norfolk, where we met several others who are just beginning their journey. We were told we are one of only 3 divisions in Virginia using CKLA, and a tiny division at that. We had a great opportunity there to talk with Jeff Danmiller from Amplify and share with him a video we made back in August. Most of the other counties in Virginia are waiting for the approved curriculum list to come out by the state. We know CKLA will be on it, and we couldn't wait. One of our assistant superintendents said the worst thing we could ever do is to know that what we were doing was wrong and not change now. This is what we believe here in Patrick County. We want what is best for our students and our teachers. We don't just want them to teach CKLA because that is what we bought. We want them to understand the knowledge behind it, learn the research, and the why. Our greatest achievement is bringing this knowledge to our teachers, implementing curriculum rooted in SOR, and doing what's best for our students.